How do people do intros? Like, seriously, how? Hello! Welcome to Makers and Monsters! My name is Theodore, and I want to talk about a problem that I run a lot across. You know what? I'm going to keep it, because I've restarted this thing like 1,000 times. I want to talk a problem that I run across a lot when I am trying to find knit and crochet patterns that actually fit my body, because I am a bit of a large, and I'm absolutely stunningly adorable. However, a lot of patterns don't always fit me, and I've spent many years trying to figure out how to alter those patterns that I find to make them fit me. So I'm starting this channel, which is going to be a bit more dedicated towards recipe style things. I have a lot of plans for socks, hats. Well, hats are usually pretty standard, but like socks, sweater vests, all sorts of things, and we're gonna also learn how to alter them for, you know, anything that we really need or want to alter them for. Maybe you have like horns and you want to make sure that your hat has holes and spaces for those horns to fit through, or you want to make a sweater vest but you have wings, so you need to be able to, like, we're gonna figure out how to put those slits in that for the wings. Or maybe you have, honestly, anyone who has acrylics, I'm so jealous. They're so pretty. But with my ticks, the way I tick sometimes, I can't. It's too dangerous for me. I don't want to poke out my eye. But, you know, I have a pattern for gloves that's gonna come up here pretty quick, where you can make them as long as you want and kind of cinch them closed, or you can fold them over and have fingerless gloves. So this is where I'm going to put a lot of the tricks and edits and alterations that I've come up with throughout the years to make it work. Whether you're a legendary being or just an absolute legend, or you just like to alter things, this will be the channel for you. So I have my notes here because originally my idea for this video was going to be a really simple, I don't know where I think I put it behind me, how to make a grip, and I made one for this just because it was easy and quick. I've decided that rather than start with an albeit very good beginner's project, I am going to start with an overview, because, I mean, anyone who's tried to get into knitting and crochet, we know there's a lot of vocabulary. So I'm going to have a general overview of a lot of the vocabulary and the basics, and I will put a timeline in the description so you can jump to, you know, whatever part you want to jump to. I've got a lot of the vocabulary noted down to discuss different types of tools, how to read a yarn skein. So let's jump into this. I have a Google Doc in front of me. You can't see it, but I can. And I will be also linking this in the description, so you can come back and watch the video, or you can save this Google Doc and be able to reference it as you will. So I thought the thing that I would start with first would be the vocabulary. And the first word that I have on here is probably the word that I see most people ask about the most, which is the term frog or frogging. And frogging is just a term for ripping out a piece, whether you're like, you know what, this entire project isn't really working out the way I thought it would, so I'm just gonna reuse this yarn, I'll frog it. Or say you're just like, oh, I messed up this thing 5 rows back, I'm gonna frog it. It's just pulling the yarn that you've done out of the project and putting it back in the, just ripping out the project, basically. You also hear rip it out, which is where you get the term frog, because if you're ripping it out, you're rip it, ribbit. Okay. I am back. The AC turned on behind me because I forgot to turn it off first. But to finish what I was saying, knitting and crochet are very punny sometimes, so be aware of that. Another common one is FO, which means, you know, your finished object or a project. UFO is an unfinished object or project. WIP or WIP is a work in progress, which is, you know, whatever you've got on the hook or on your needles at the time. And you've got your gauge, which is the ratio of stitches per whatever the amount that the maker of the pattern has said. So a common one is 4 inches. Maybe you're supposed to have 20 stitches in 4 inches and however many for that going up. And you match that ratio, because sometimes a pattern will be like, okay, use a size 5mm hook for this, but the gauge is this, and if using a 5mm hook your gauge is too big, you have too many stitches or too few stitches for that project, it'll affect the fit. If you have too little stitches, it'll come out too small. If you have too many stitches, it'll turn out too big. So that's what the gauge is, and that's what the gauge is for. We have SABLE, S-A-B-L-E, which is stash acquisition beyond life expectancy. It's when you get more yarn and have more yarn in your stash than you will be able to use in your lifetime, and a lot of people have become SABLE. Right side, which is why I have my sweater vest that I made. So the right side of your work is the side that is visible when it's worn. So on the sweater vest, it's the side with all of the V's. And then if you go on the other side, it's bumpy. So the bumpy side is the wrong side. It's the side that is the inside of the sweater vest that's against my skin. So the right side is always what will face outwards. The wrong side is always what will face inwards when a garment is worn, or when, like, say you make a bag, the bag is in use. Notions are just anything that you need when you're making something. The yarn, the scissors, the hook or the set of needles, if you need a cable needle, if you need a sewing needle, scissors, stitch markers, stitch counters, just anything that you need there. Buttons, zippers, measuring tape. Those are all notions. A swift is, I did not grab my swift. I will grab my swift. Give me a second. So this is my umbrella swift. It will be in the end sequence of this video. But you put the yarn on it when it's in hank form. A hank is all the one where it's all twisted up. So you untwist it, you put it on this, you move it to where the yarn is, you know, set, and this unscrews, and you hook it over a table, and then you screw this to hold it, you screw this shut, and this will hold the yarn while you wind it into a cake, into a ball, whatever of your choice. So that's what a swift is. This one specifically is an umbrella swift. Put that on the ground. A winder is a thing that you can use in conjunction with a swift or on its own, and I don't know what I did with ours, which my roommate's going to be annoyed with me with, but it'll turn up. I'll find it. But a winder, you just thread the yarn through it. It's got this little cylinder and a lever, and you just wind the yarn. It winds a ball or a cake for you, and it does it so much faster than you can do it by hand. So it's very nice to have. But it's definitely not necessary, especially if you're not buying hanks or you don't like working with cakes. And I will go through what cakes and hanks and skeins and the differences in those are here in a second, so just stay tuned. Blocking is when you kind of shape your finished garment. It's what gives a lot of things that professional look. So there are multiple forms of blocking. You can like gently wet your like entire piece just in the sink or the tub and lay it out on a towel and like pin it in the shape of the way it needs to be and it'll dry. Or they make kind of, how do I describe this? You remember those mats that had like foam puzzle pieces and there were letters and they all like connected from our childhood. It was those, but just different decorations, and you can pin things to those and they'll dry and they'll have that shape. And you typically have to block things each time you wash them. Acrylics, you kind of don't really have to block. Some people do, some people don't. I block some of them, things that I make that are acrylic, but not others. It just depends. Those you can usually just throw in the washer. It's usually natural fibers that people block because natural fibers will expand when you wash them or get them wet. So if you block them first, it kind of helps stay in that shape. It just makes everything look a lot more professional. Evens out your stitch sizes in knitting. So if you're pulling from the inside of a skein or a cake or whatever have you, you've got your thing and it's just grabbing the thread from the inside and pulling it out and using that to make your product. Pulling from the outside is using the end of the yarn that is on the outside. I prefer the outside just because if you pull from the inside, eventually you have a thing that just collapses, and I'm not a fan. But pulling from the inside keeps it, pretty. If you pull from the outside, it tends to roll around, and pulling from the inside makes that less of a problem. It's just all up to personal preference. Another thing you should know is if you pull from the inside, you can have what is called yarn barf, where the inside of the skein is kind of all knotted up a little bit more, and it just all comes out at the same time. And it can be incredibly annoying if you're not a fan of yarn barf. So the working yarn when you have a project is you make your knot that you start at your slip knot, which is the starting knot for any project really. And the long yarn connected to the ball, that is your working yarn. The tail is that little yarn that hangs out. You can also have tails if you cut your yarn because you're changing colors or you have to start a new skein because you ran out of yarn in the middle of your project. Those can also leave tails. Weaving in tails is just you taking a thread needle and sewing all of those tails in. And then they stay in place easier. You won't have the middle of your piece unraveling because that knot came out. It's just also makes things look more professional. Stitch markers are little things similar to, I'm going to go with the green one, I think it'll show up more. This. There we go. So there are a bunch of different kinds. I have I think probably 6 or 7 different kinds. You have these little circles, you have these that lock. Crochet ones tend to have ones that somehow or other have openings, because that's how you get it into a crochet stitch. Knitting you can use either ones that open or fully closed ones. I have fully closed ones that look like cat ears. They're very adorable. I have some Halloween themed ones that are also closed. I just dropped it. You also have stitch counters, and I have one in the form of a ring. So there's little numbers on it. There we go. There's little numbers on it, and every time you finish a row, you update it to match that row. I don't actually tend to use this all that often, and it's actually like a D&D life counter ring, I believe. I got it off of Etsy, so I don't actually use it all that often. If I'm counting rows, I usually just put a stitch marker every 10 rows. It just works better for me. I like that better. But they come in rings, they come in these little tube things that are the same concept. You just fix it. You can get those ones that click. So that is all of the words that I have written down. So now I'm going to talk about the types of chunks of yarn. So you have a ball. Everyone knows what a ball of yarn looks like. Just a ball. This is a cake. It is squat and like a little cylinder. And this one is a little bit unraveled. You have your cakes, which are these are what the yarn winders will make when you wind one up. And they're really easy to work with. I I actually now tend to, even my yarn things that I buy that are in skeins, I'll put them in cakes because I just like cakes. They're nice to work with. You have your skeins, and this is also a used one. And these are, you'll buy them like this a lot if you buy them from Joann's or Michael's or other stores, big box stores. And they come in this form. And you can also pull from the center or pull from the outside. This is a donut. Because it looks like a donut. And they're just very cute. And I love that we call them donuts. And this one is, I believe, Milky Yarn. I'm probably mispronouncing that. Apologies to everyone. Those are all the types of yarn. I don't have any hanks at the moment. I tend to wind those up as soon as I get them because I don't like having them hanging around in hank form. I feel like they'll get messed up. I tend to be very chaotic in my placing of things. So just as an act of protection, I tend to cake them up pretty immediately. Oh, some more notions. You have these. And they just sit on the end of your needle if you're knitting. I almost said if you're needling. And keep, when you're done, when you set your project down, maybe you're done for the night or you're going to get in the car or something, they hold your things on your piece, your stitches in place. They hold your stitches in place. So now I'm going to cover the types of crochet hooks and needles. So this is a straight needle. It's just, your iconic knitting needle. So put those there. Crochet hook. This one's wooden, and I don't think it's hand carved. Move those away from the mic. These, and this is not a full set, it's just I had 2 of them nearby, are double pointed needles because they have 2 points. They are used, like you'll have 4 or 5 of them in a circle, and they're for crocheting in the round, or people use them to make socks a lot. They're really common sock needles. I prefer wood needles if I'm working flat, and I prefer metal needles if I am working in the round. This is a circular needle. Circular needles are connected with a cable. You can buy sets that are fixed. This is fixed, or you can buy sets that are interchangeable and the cable comes off and you can connect it to different size needles, which are very handy if you knit in the round a lot or knit a lot of large things flat, like blankets, or sweater fronts and backs flat. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip. Sorry about that. My throat was doing things, so I got a little sip of my drink. Another thing that you should look for in crochet needles, if you're here to learn how to crochet, is some needles, figure out where my lens is, are blunt. The point here is blunt, and some needles, it's sharp. I prefer working with blunt needles, but sharp needles can go into the stitch that you're working easier. I don't like the point of the hook, that is the hook part, being sharp, because I split a lot of yarn that way. And then I have to redo the stitch, and that annoys me. So keep an eye out for that. I don't have any really needles or hooks that are high end. I don't really go low end, but I go middle end because money, and also because a lot of the higher end, at least knitting needles, tend to be sharper. And for a lot of people, that makes knitting a lot easier. But again, Tourette's, I don't always tick, but the times that I do, I'll hit. I don't want to hurt myself, but keep in mind that the higher end stuff can be sharper. Okay, so bit of a light change. My phone camera did something very strange and stopped recording partway through that. So I believe, if you let me fix my notes, I believe we were talking about yarn weights, which is good because that was reasonably close to the end. So when people are talking about yarn weights, they're talking about the thickness of the yarn from, the thin end to the thick end. So I've got some common ones here, except I forgot about sock weight because Personally, I don't like working with small yarns. That's just a personal thing for me. Everyone has something they don't like working with. For me, it's small yarn. So I forgot about sock weight, but I believe it fits in somewhere around fingering and sport weight. And sound off in the comments if I'm wrong about that. I don't work with sock weight yarn, so I don't know. But anyways, so from thinnest to thickest, we have thread, lace, fingering, sport, DK, worsted, which is also number 4 yarn. These also have corresponding numbers. The smaller the number, the smaller the yarn thickness. The larger the number, larger the yarn thickness. Easy peasy, lemon breezy. Worsted yarn is typically number 4 yarn. It is one of the more common yarns. It's the yarn I like to work with. Everything I showed you in this video earlier, with the exception of the donut, was worsted weight yarn. So after worsted, we have Aran, bulky, super bulky, and jumbo. And those are, the common yarn weights. So there are a lot of different yarn types. They mostly fit into 2 categories, natural and synthetic. So natural yarns are the yarns that come from, your animals that get sheared, which, for the record, does not hurt the animals. I've seen drama from time to time online about, I know PETA had a really nonsense ad, but shearing does not hurt animals. Shearing is usually very good for the animals. A lot of domestic animals, I believe sheep specifically, have been bred to the point that it's unhealthy for them. They can't not be sheared. So of the natural yarns, you have your wools, which a lot of the common ones are, a lot of your common wools are lamb, merino, Shetland, Icelandic, alpaca. That is my favorite, especially baby alpaca. It's just so soft. I'm autistic. I like soft things. You have your fleeces, which are mohair and cashmere. You also have silk, cotton, linen, and rayon. The thing with cotton is there are a lot of different types of cotton. You have garment cotton, which is really soft and is really, really good to have garments made out of because it's breathable. It gets the moisture away from you. Linen, even more so, gets the moisture away from you. But you also have dishcloth cotton, which goes into wash rags and stuff. Scrubbies, they make yarn specifically for scrubbies. So that's, be aware of what cotton you're buying. A lot of the cotton at Joann's is for wash rags, so would not recommend wearing that. Especially if you have sensitivities to texture. And then your synthetics are acrylic, nylon, and polyester. They both have, natural and synthetics both have their pluses and their minuses. Acrylic is, in my opinion, easier to work with, but it's easier to wash. It's usually washable in just your washer and dryer. It's cheaper. You can get it easily at your box stores, but it is plastic for the most part, if not entirely plastic, versus your naturals, which are more expensive, but they're nicer quality. And people get really specific with what they'll use sometimes, but never let anyone tell you you can't work with something, or real knitters or real crocheters don't work with this, because you can work with whatever you want to work. There are people who make yarn out of literal grocery bags, and they'll just rip them up and use those as strands of yarn. And there are people who you can buy yarn that is ripped up t-shirts. You can work with whatever you want to work with. People use literal rope to make rugs and baskets. Go forth and make what you want to make. You have my permission. So I need to cover the yarn sleeve. Yarn sleeves have not just the information of, that's upside down. My hand is vibrating, I apologize. The name and brand of the yarn, but also there's a lot of information about the size of the yarn, how much yarn is in the skein, how you take care of it. So right here at the top layer, we have what recommended hook and needle sizes are, and also the recommended gauge for when you are working with this, but you can do whatever the pattern says or whatever you want to do. If you go up a hook or needle size when you're working with the yarn, it makes the stitches bigger, which is how a lot of people get kind of lacy effects. Just use a really big hook or needle, or you can go with a smaller hook or yarn and it makes the stitches smaller and it can make the fabric more dense and more compact and a little bit warmer if that's what you're going for. But also you might have to change hook and needle size to match the gauge of the pattern so that the piece that you're making will actually fit to the dimensions you need it to fit to. Also at the top we have this, I really hope this isn't backwards for y'all, this little yarn icon. It's got a 6 in it and it says super bulky. That is the weight of the yarn. As I mentioned earlier, the bigger the number, the heavier the yarn. In this middle black band here, we have the weight and the length measurement of how much yarn is in this thing. Some people will be like, okay, I'm making a sweater, I need X amount of grams or ounces. I don't usually work that way. I tend to go by yards, so that is also on here. Below that in the gold is the makeup of the yarn, and this is 80% acrylic and 80% alpaca. For the record, I got this at Joann's. But I also got it at Joann's several years ago, so I don't know if it's still there. I got this either when I used to work there or right after I stopped working there. I think it was right after I stopped working there. And then on the very bottom is how to care for that. And to be honest, the only one on here that I know what the symbol means is the don't iron it, and that's because it's acrylic and the iron will melt it because it's plastic. So you'll have to Google what the dishwasher symbols mean on your own. The dishwasher, the clothes washer symbols mean on your own, because I don't know. I'm 26 years old. I just threw everything in one thing. That is all that I have on my document, which, as I said earlier, will be linked to the description. Save it, print it, use it, love it. I don't go for it. I made it for y'all. I would also like to recommend, I forgot to do this earlier, so it's probably a good thing that my camera stopped working. When I first started, I am fully self-taught. My uncle tried to teach me knitting, and then I forgot everything that he taught me and taught myself from scratch. At that point, okay, I think this happened. Well, let me look at it. But I got these at a Walmart in late 2014, early 2015. It says Pocket Guide to Crochet and Knitting. And these were a lifesaver when I started out. It covers with very nice diagrams what certain stitches are, how to make them. It talks about yarn weights. And this one has, the crochet one has icons of the actual weight of the yarn. So you're like, hey, I have this and I don't know what this is. I'm going to hold it up against this and that will help me identify it. The knitting one it's got needle sizes on there too. So if you randomly find a needle and you're like, oh, I can't read what it says, you can hold it against this and match it. And it's really nice. I like it. According to these pamphlets, there's also a baby weight yarn on the small side. So there's that too. And it's got a list of all the common knitting abbreviations. So that is all of the things that I had on my document. And the last thing that I want to say before we go is, if you're starting out, if you're watching this video because you're thinking about getting into crochet or getting into knitting, and to be honest, this also, as a side note, this channel / Ravelry page is probably also going to be leaning heavily more towards crochet. And there will also be an attached Ravelry page, so all of the patterns on here, you can go look at the Ravelry and they'll be written out. But everyone's first piece looks a little wonky. They all do. They always have, and they always will. People skip stitches. People have weird tension because you haven't figured out, how tight to hold the yarn or how to hold the crochet hook. So your tension will even out as you crochet. So if you start with a scarf like I did, it might be a little pizza shaped. You might have skipped stitches. It's an art form, just like all other art forms. And it takes time to train your eyes and to train your hands and to let it click and understand what you're doing. keep going. Keep finishing. Don't start over again and again and again with your project. Keep going. See it through. Start another project. If you start with a washcloth, finish your washcloth, make another. You will get the hang of it. It will happen. It will click. And you will be very happy if this is something that you want to do, that you didn't get discouraged. And soon enough, you'll be making beautiful pieces that I look very forward to seeing. So, have faith. Keep going. I hope everyone stays safe. I hope you're doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. And I look forward to seeing you all next time. Bye. Look at this good boy. He wanted to say hello. Okay, he didn't want to say hello. I just wanted to hug him. Say hello, Rory. Say hello to the camera. I got cat hair on my lipstick.